Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Ideas Sin. I am your host, Denise, and today I'm excited to bring Manny onto the show. So, Manny and I met through the Earth Native Wilderness School, and he was an instructor of mine for one of the classes. And I'll jump into that in just a moment. But, Manny, how's it going? How you doing today?
Just lovely, thank you. Good to see you.
Likewise. How are your patients treating you? Are they being nice?
No, yeah, they're great. They're great.
That's good. And so for folks that are listening, Manny is a doctor and you work primarily with kids or with adults too?
So I'm a family physician. So that means I have training in all age groups. So newborns to quite a bit older or wiser, and then I've also had prenatal training as well, but I haven't done that since residency. So mainly
Oh,
just kids and adults.
okay. Yeah, that's a pretty intensive process going through medical school, right? From what
Yes,
I hear.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, right. Everything comes with ups and downs, but yeah, it is. It's so 4 years of medical school, and then you do 3 years of residency training.
Mhm. Was there a reason you wanted to work with kids and, like, adults and not, like, specialize in something in particular, or was that what you wanted to specialize in?
So I enjoy the meeting the personal relationships with patients, and when going through medical school, yeah, I actually enjoyed all of the different specialties that we rotated through, surgery and what have you. And so I didn't want to get bogged down with, specializing in just one thing, because knowing my personality, I would have gotten bored with that. Yeah, jumped into family medicine, and that way I can really just expand my knowledge base and really just every day you're presented with something different.
Mm. Yeah, I think I totally get that. I have the same kind of personality. I like to have, things kinda mixed up in my life every once in a while, try different things, and it's just nice because you learn different things and then it can apply to something else that you never really expected.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
right? And so
Yeah.
what brought you to Earth Native?
A complete whim. So I grew up in Maryland, suburbs of Maryland, right outside of DC, and my knowledge of outdoor skills and primitive survival was zero, basically.
Same.
Um, Yeah, it was terrible. And yeah, in 2013, I think right around that time, I think Bear Grylls. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of him.
Mm,
No,
actually, I don't think so. No.
oh, so he used to be. He was a former SAS, so British Special Forces officer, and was also, I think, the youngest person to ever summit Mount Everest. He did it when he was like
Okay.
19 or something. But anyway, at that time, he was putting out shows, about like outdoor survival and that sort of thing. And I realized I had zero clue, and so I did a Survival 101 class at Earth Native, and just fell in love with it, and immediately signed up for the survival intensive that you took.
Yeah. And so what was one of the challenging things that you ended up encountering in your well, it could have just been the intro or in the intensive. What do you think was like the most challenging thing for you to deal with?
Funny enough, the mental part of it, the psychological part of it. Um, going through residency, you're accustomed to high levels of stress, with very little sleep, and there's no set rhyme or reason to when those episodes of stress will occur. And so I always thought that I was pretty good at handling myself in stressful situations. But when it's you and the outdoors and Mother Nature, yeah, it's a completely different ball game. And so
Yeah.
it took a little while to get used to that.
Yeah, it does. Mother Nature's unpredictable.
Yes, she gives and she takes away, and
Mhm.
so yeah, it's just learning to cope with that relationship, and to adjust yourself, and check yourself really.
Mhm. And did you find that after your intro course, you maybe gained enough knowledge to apply certain things to your everyday life? Or did you find that the most growth happened after the intensive course?
Yeah, definitely after the intensive. The intro, yeah. If anything, the intro just made me realize, okay, there is a lot I don't know, about myself, really, but also, yeah, just Earth in general,
Mhm.
um, and how we fit into the planet. But yeah, after the survival intensive, absolutely, yes, outdoor skills improved a great deal. They're still improving, but yeah, the psychological aspect of it, absolutely translates into everyday life.
Mhm. And for the psychological aspect, I mean, it's really interesting because you went through the course as a student and then now you're teaching it. And so, do you find that you're now dealing with maybe different psychological challenges as a teacher now versus being a student?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So, as a being an instructor, it's always great just getting the dirt time, right? Just being outside and helping students, with their improvement of their skills and their knowledge. Um, it is a little bit different because I know what the students are going through, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and so I don't want to impart my experience and my feelings and my thoughts about a given situation onto the student, because really it's up to the individual person to develop their own experience and their connection with the earth. And so in that way, yeah, it's a little bit different.
Mm. So, what do you think are some of the challenges that you've been encountering now as a teacher?
um Well, it sounds funny, but it's kind of like raising a teenage son. Uh, it's seeing the mistakes that they're making, and not wanting to jump in and fix everything.
Mm,
And it's allowing that person to really just, again, experience the situation on their own terms, and growing in their own ways. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to not step in.
mm. And you do have a teenage son too, right?
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
know.
he's 15, and yeah, and so yeah, it's hard. He needs to develop as his own person, and
Mhm.
he just needs me to be supportive and not to be corrective.
Yeah, that's a skill in and of itself is to be able to, yeah, support and just be like, here's what I can give you without giving you the answer or
Right,
fixing the situation for you.
right, yep.
Yeah. I mean, so as a student, when you were in the course, what what was your like experience like with all the different personality types that were also taking the class? Because from my experience anyway, it feels like Earth Native classes, they just bring in so many different types of people from varying backgrounds. And so, from your
Mhm.
experience, what was that like for you?
So I like to think that I'm a pretty good people person, and so I get along pretty well with all different personality types. Um, and that's another thing that is so great about the survival intensive is that you definitely learn to deal with small group dynamics, right? Because interpersonal, exchanges are going to be different depending on the different personalities. And so, um, but yeah, I think I handle that pretty well. And I think that if nothing else, really, that was actually very helpful as far as making me realize, okay, this is how I respond in stressful situations with different personalities versus day to day dealings with people in general. It's going to be very different, right? The way we behave in stressful situations are completely different from what we imagine that we're going to act and behave. When we're sitting behind a desk, right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, and as a doctor, I can only imagine you're constantly dealing with different types of personalities and behaviors, especially when people are sick and they don't know what's happening with them. So do you think that your profession helped you in being able to adapt to, this like survival course where it is you are put in another stressful situation where you have to deal with all of these people, but do you think there's an overlap in that?
For sure. So especially during residency training, when you're dealing literally with people's lives, and so that kind of stress teaches you to basically check yourself, and like to tell my students, and in that you learn to kind of step away in a sense and just focus on the job that's in front of you, the issue that's in front of you, and learning to address that right then and there, so staying present. But again, when you're dealing with mother nature and different personalities, again, yeah, it is different, but absolutely the residency training helped a great deal.
Mhm. Would you say that in the group dynamic, were you more of a lead or a follower or an observer? Or what do you think your role was within the group?
You know, so in medicine, there's something called a code blue, right? So when someone has a heart attack, and this is when their heart stops beating, there's a code team, and so that includes respiratory therapists, nurses, physicians, what have you, and we're all working to resuscitate or revive the person. And in a code, and this is true in medicine in general,
Mhm.
and people don't realize this. Yeah, nurses actually do the majority of the work. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I've
And
seen
so,
it. I get
yeah, oh
that.
my gosh, they
Yeah.
are so underappreciated, so undervalued.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of the time during a code, the physician is going to actually kind of step back and will just guide the code, right? So as different, scenarios occur, the physician will say, yeah, let's do blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, that was my role basically in that small group dynamics as well, is that I would sit back a lot, just kind of watch. And if I felt like I needed to step in as a leadership capacity, then yeah, absolutely, I would do that.
Mm, yeah. And I guess this is more of a random question, but in a code blue like that, if you are guiding the nurses and everybody else to work on a patient and something happens with the patient and they end up passing. Is like the physician technically accountable, or is it like the team that's technically accountable?
So ultimately, it's the physician.
Hmm.
Ultimately, um, but there are instances where you can do everything known to man, but you know we're not always successful, right? And so I definitely believe in a higher being, and that sometimes the higher being just has different plans, and so there's only so much you can do. But
Yeah.
yeah, again, in the end, yeah, physician is ultimately where the buck stops.
Mm, okay. And do you think that that's something that a lot of physicians eventually get desensitized to? I know we're hopping from like survival now to like more medical
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
questions.
That's great. That's great. That's great.
But do you think like physicians and doctors eventually just become desensitized to dealing with death with their patients? Or do you think like they compartmentalize? Or what are your experiences with that or observations with it?
Yeah, so you have to some degree, in order to protect yourself and to be able to continue to operate in a way that will continue to help other people. Um, if you empathize too much, and if you take that self-imposed guilt too much, excessively, then yeah, absolutely, it's going to wreck you emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And so, yeah, then you can't, if you're not being good to yourself, you can't be good to others. And so, yeah, to some degree, you have to desensitize yourself a little bit. But, overdoing it is always a bad thing too, right? You have to find that happy balance.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's true. I mean, we've definitely I'm sure people have encountered like overly empathetic doctors and doctors who aren't super empathetic, um, with situations. But I mean, even in a survival situation, one of the things that you always tried to help us focus on was, again, being in the present moment, like you noted earlier, but also focusing on your breath because it allows you to calm yourself and center and eventually find that balance again, depending on where you are in whatever given situation. So, did you find that you had a continuous breath work routine while you were practicing medicine, or do you think that a lot of that developed after you started taking the survival courses and or even teaching the courses?
Yeah, so funny enough, absolutely, it developed way after residency. There, especially in the past few years, there has been more focus on breath work in general. So, like Wim Hof, for
Mhm.
instance. There's Laird Hamilton, big wave surfer, and Gabrielle Reeves, his wife. She was a professional volleyball player. They've created a workout exercise regimen called XPT, and breath work is a big focus of their regimen. And yeah, absolutely, breathing and focusing on breathing and correct breathing actually makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference. And so those techniques that I learned and encouraged, my students with, absolutely, I still practice those on a daily basis, and totally helps in even day to day stressful situations.
And so, what do you mean by correct breathing? Like, what is considered incorrect breathing?
Sure. So, adults, we have a tendency to breathe through our mouths. Infants are obligate nose breathers. They just really don't know how to breathe through their mouth. And breathing through your nose stimulates a lot of different chemicals, nitric oxide, that sort of thing, that really help improve the overall functioning of the body. And so, um, as far as the psychological aspect of it, when you focus on your breathing, when you're in a stressful situation, you need to control. There's a feeling or a need to control something, right? When it feels like everything's out of control. And the first thing that you need to control is yourself, right? You need to check in with yourself. And the best way to do that is through focusing on your breath. And so if you focus on your breathing, everything will actually improve. Your mental facility, your faculties, and processing just improves tremendously. And so then, yeah, you can address the situation in a calm or calmer manner.
Mm. Yeah, and you did mention that too in the wilderness first aid course as well. Is when you see a situation happening, assess yourself, check yourself to see if you are even capable of going to help. Like, are you going to put yourself in that situation? And I wonder how many people skip that step and they're just like, oh my gosh. And they just run into it and yeah, they just expose themselves to a situation they weren't even aware of. Like, how often
Right.
have you dealt with that where people just come in and they're like, I just found this guy. And then, they're trying to help, but then they end up also needing to get checked out because they weren't mentally in the right place to help.
Yeah. Oh, you see that all the time.
Oh, really?
All the time. No, absolutely. And it doesn't always have to be in a dramatic situation, but
Mhm,
yeah, any stressful situation, absolutely. And, again, people just don't realize that, yeah, check in with yourself first. And then, because again, you can't be of any use or really good use to someone else if you're not in a good headspace.
mhm. And how often.
It's like in the airlines when the oxygen bags drop down, right?
Yeah.
The instructions are to put your own face mask on before you help others. And yeah, you can't help others if you are freaking the heck out.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true with just general life. Like you just see people that are constantly overworking or overextending themselves and they're like, "No, but I need to do this and I have to provide and this and that." But we don't realize like you also need to take care of yourself because then in doing that, you're like recharging your own battery, you're meeting your own needs and you're not going to be depleted. And for some folks, it's like, well, I have to do all this for my kids. But then if you're driving yourself to the point of sleep deprivation or something, like you're eventually going to start making mistakes in what you're doing because you're just not even mentally there.
Yep,
So, I mean, nowadays, have you seen an increase in, I guess, maybe cases from people?
absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, um, yeah, and just mental health in general.
Mhm.
Absolutely. For past 10, 15 years, really is just, and I'm glad nowadays there is more focus and more awareness and more acceptance of mental health issues. Still not great, still not
Mhm.
perfect, but it is much better. And so, yeah, absolutely. There's, yeah, we see that on a day-to-day basis and in all age groups. There isn't any socioeconomic group that is more susceptible to others, no race more susceptible to others, no gender. Um, every human being on this planet, yeah, is going through stressful situations on a daily basis, and the pandemic really highlighted that, and actually exacerbated things. But yeah, absolutely, we see that day in, day out.
Mhm. Do you think that a lot of the more progressive diseases are could possibly just stem from stress? And then maybe once stress is alleviated, the disease calms down or even heals itself?
um I don't know if stress wouldn't necessarily be a root cause for chronic diseases, but absolutely can exacerbate
Mhm.
and contribute, to that particular issue. Um, but yeah, when people are going through stress and aren't capable of addressing it very appropriately or very well for that matter, yeah, absolutely, it can lead to anxiety. It can lead to depression and other mental health issues. And when those issues hit a certain tipping point, absolutely, you can have physical manifestations, right? Fatigue and mood swings and palpitations and panic attacks, that sort of thing. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how often are you referring people to a mental health specialist versus, just prescribing them some medication for what it is that they're dealing with?
Yeah, so I tell my patients this all the time. So I'm a Western trained physician. So, you know, unfortunately, that basically just makes me a glorified drug dealer. Um, yeah, but I think medicine for a while has swung too far to the end of the spectrum where medications, procedures were the go-to, and those are great tools, but they shouldn't be crutches. And unfortunately, I think too many providers rely on them as crutches. But for me, with healthcare, you have to incorporate all the tools, and so that includes therapy, that includes meditation, that includes exercise, that includes food as medicine. So, yeah, absolutely. When it's appropriate, for sure, I'll refer people to a therapist or a psychologist um, all the time.
Mm.
Now, will people actually follow my recommendations? Sure, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. You have to incorporate all the tools.
Mhm. Yeah, I've definitely been one of those patients where either the doctor or dentist or somebody would tell me something and I'm like, "Oh, right. Yeah."
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right. I've gotten better though, for sure. Because I know that it does impact your life, and it's really about changing the habits and changing the way you live. And when you take the steps to do that, your life can like really change for the better. And a lot of people don't realize that because they think it's like, I'm going to start eating salad every single day and then I'm going to be super healthy. And it's like, there's there's much more to that in order to really see a difference. And it's about being open-minded to what else can complement that. Like, what else can you be doing to add to your salad, or like exercising and breath work and things like that. uh, do you have a particular, like, a favorite style of breath work?
Um, so one thing that well, and sorry, you missed out on this in your class, but one thing, yeah, I know, great, thanks.
Maybe next time.
um, sure. But I know I've been really pushing more something I call mental cleansing.
Hmm.
And so it is, it starts with focusing on your breath. And basically, the way it works is that you inhale through your nose. And at the top of the inhalation, you do another quick, you know, inhalation, right? So it's,
Mhm.
um, yeah. So you inhale through your nose, and then right when you feel like you've taken a deep enough breath, then you inhale again real quick,
Mhm.
and then you exhale slowly, either through your nose or through your mouth. It doesn't matter. But just make sure that the exhalation is longer than the inhalation. And this really stimulates the brain and puts it into more of what we call a parasympathetic, right? The rest and relaxation. So, sympathetic nervous system is a fight or flight response, right, to stress. Parasympathetic is, rest um, and digestion. And so, Um, Breathing like that really stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, and so it just calms everything down. And so do that for several breath cycles, 3, 4, 5, until you feel calmer. Then at that point, I tell people to just verbalize out loud all the things that are bothering them, upsetting them, angering them, scaring them. And while it's not perfect, because there's no sounding board and there's no validation of those feelings and thoughts, just the physical act of saying it out loud really does relieve stress a great deal. And then once you've done that, then verbalize again all the things that you're grateful for. And it doesn't have to be, some deep, profound thing that you're grateful for. Like, I am so grateful for the eggnog latte I had this morning. Like,
Eggnog latte.
yeah. But yeah, so, that's not necessarily a type of breath work, but again, just starting with that sort of breathing and then those verbalizations really just do a great job of relieving stress. And so I personally practice that on a daily basis. And I encourage all my patients to do that, when they're driving home by themselves, when they're showering by themselves, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, people should just be doing that on a daily basis.
Mhm. So did you just start that with this new class?
Um, yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, like I said, mental health issues are popping up left and right.
Yeah.
And it's really impacting, people's overall health. And so, we need to try to improve our stress management on a daily basis. And so, yeah, I really try and push that.
Yeah. No, that's great. My nerdy side is like, oh man, if you can start running a survey now and then have them run one later, you can kind of see,
Yeah,
has the quality of life changed at all since you started doing breath work? And obviously, it's going to be a little diluted because they're going through all these like crazy
sure.
experiences and stuff. But the breath work
Yeah.
part would be really cool to measure. Yeah. And what?
But yeah,
Mhm.
doing that sort of breathing, before or during any stressful situation, absolutely will make a big difference.
And then, have you done the breath work to do the opposite to get you more pumped up and energized? I can't remember what it's called, but it's like, ugh, they've done this for like ice bath preparation, and I can't remember what
Yep.
it's called.
Yep.
Do you know what it
Yeah.
is?
So
Yeah.
Wim Hof, it does a great job with that, right?
Mhm.
Because yeah, that sort of breathing again stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, right? The fight or flight. But there's also breathing that will increase the internal body temperature, right? And so, the Wim Hof method was based off of, and I cannot remember the monks that practice this and have perfected it, but basically these monks in the dead of winter on the coldest freaking night they can imagine will go out in the mountaintops with just their robes, and they will have wet towels or wet blankets placed over them. And just from breathing, they will warm up the towels to dry the towels in essence. And so, yeah, which again, it sounds crazy and ridiculous, but yeah, they do that every year. And again, the Wim Hof method is derived from that that style of breathing.
Have you ever tried it yourself?
No, I've always wanted to,
Ooh.
but yeah, I just wimped out.
Aw. See, now I think like this needs to happen. I think it just needs to. We have to schedule a time to go and like practice this.
Sure, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, you know, you have to do some sort of breath work. So, cold plunge, right, has gained
Mhm.
popularity um, recently. And so, yeah, absolutely. You really need to focus on the breathing before you do something like that. And so, but yes, I think you and I need to do the Wim Hof course.
Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, I have his book. It's just sitting on my chair, and I've read, like, a few chapters, and then I ended up putting it down, and I started reading a bunch of other books because that's what I end up doing. But yeah, I've done
Right.
the ice baths before, and yeah, a lot of it is really mental and just like breathing through it. And it's just so funny to watch like different people experiencing that. And then even myself, like if I take breaks in between the times that I've done it, I'll be like, oh man, I can't last that long. And then another time, I think I lasted like 5 minutes or something. And so I was just like,
Hmm.
I am permanently broken, like just from being in the water for this long. But it's really interesting. Like, have you done the ice baths or cold plunges yet?
Yeah. So, I mentioned XPT, right? Laird
Mhm.
Hamilton, Gabby Reese. So they do something called fire and ice, where you
Oh.
do 3 minutes in an ice bath, 3 minutes in a sauna, and you do that for 3 rounds. And yeah, absolutely. The first time I did the cold plunge, it was awful,
Yeah.
just awful. Um, but you know, you definitely get used to it, and especially when you start focusing on the breathing, and the benefits are
Mhm.
amazing,
And so, would you
amazing.
suggest doing, like, sauna first and then the ice bath, or ice bath first and then sauna?
Um, so ideally, if you could do both, that'd be great. Whether you do the ice first or the sauna first really doesn't matter. But the cold plunge or the ice bath isn't for everyone, and so especially if you have like certain heart conditions, not a good idea. Especially the ice bath. But having said that, though, yeah, absolutely. The benefits physically, mentally, emotionally are amazing. Same with the sauna work as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, I like doing that after, like, training and working out, and I would do, like, contrast showers before I even got to the ice bath, and I had a friend who was constantly pushing me to do the ice baths, and finally I gave in, and I started doing it more often. Um, but I also, learned and have been reading that it could potentially accelerate, like, weight loss. Have you heard about that?
Yeah. So what happens with consistent exposure like that? The body fat changes. So it becomes more from the white fat tissue to a brown fat tissue or adipose. And so brown fat, you think of like hibernating animals like bears. They have a lot of their fat tissue is brown fat. And so um, that is again, the cold exposure helps change the composition of the fat tissue, and a lot of white fat is what you find around organs, right, especially in the GI and the abdomen. And so yeah, absolutely, that will lead to a change, like I said, that composition. But yeah, that can help with weight loss. Yeah, the other thing too is that it improves the metabolism, and especially the mitochondria. So mitochondria are the parts of the cells that produce energy, among other things. But main thing is they produce energy, and so consistent cold exposure actually helps improve mitochondrial respiration, and so that again will improve metabolism. But that's also um, going to stimulate improvement of the inflammatory response, and so again, yes, all those benefits are going to lead to weight loss in a way.
Okay. So a more directed question from me, just because I've been like going back and forth on that. I'm already a thin person with a very fast metabolism. So does it make sense for me to continue to do ice bath? Or would you say, yeah, just do it, but very, just less often, like not on a daily basis, maybe like once a week type of thing?
Right. So the weight loss that you see from that isn't going to be
Okay.
profound, because you still need to do all the things,
Mhm.
right? Like, the nutrition is a huge piece, right? Genetics is a pretty decent sized piece. Um, Physical output, pretty significant piece, right? So there are a lot of other factors that you need to take into consideration. But yes, even being a skinny, fit person, absolutely, you can always benefit from the effects of consistent cold therapy. Again, it's not for everyone though,
Yeah.
right? So for me personally, I see a Chinese medicine provider among other Western providers, and I have an issue with having too much fire, according to Eastern medicine. And so with having too much fire in Eastern medicine, if I do cold therapy, that is just highlighting the production of fire. And so, yeah, for me, then sauna work would actually be more beneficial and has been more beneficial.
How do people determine what kind of element you are? Like, how do they figure that out?
So I don't know as far as the uh, Eastern medicine part of it. I wish I had gone to Chinese medicine school. That would be awesome. But yeah, so seeing a traditional Chinese medicine provider would be a great way to do it. But so I've had physical manifestations that have pointed, a finger at, yeah, I'm producing too much fire, and not enough water. Again, Eastern medicine. And so, you know, you could, I guess, Google search some of these things and see how that fits into the Eastern medicine picture. But really, the best way is just to see a Chinese medicine provider.
Yeah, because that sounds very similar to Ayurveda, because Ayurveda kind of goes by those concepts as well. But they give you like a quiz and they're like, yeah, answer these questions and you'll figure it out. And sometimes you could be like a mix of two different things. Um,
Right,
so that's pretty cool.
right.
Like from an astrological perspective, I'm like, what's your sign? What's your natal chart? Because that would be interesting to see if you actually do have a lot of fire within that. And, they're already calling that out. But that's my other side of that's my other brain.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, so maybe I'll run that chart for you one day. We'll, like, analyze it.
Okay,
Yeah?
sounds
Oh,
cool.
okay, cool.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, like, how often do you find that, doctors and physicians are actually open to, well, like, Eastern medicine or astrology or, all these other, like, spiritual concepts?
It depends, but in general, not too
Oh,
open.
really?
And the main reason being is that they've done studies, and research studies, and it's shown that a lot of times, depending on what they're studying, right? So like acupuncture, for instance, or herbals, or what have you, Reiki. Don't necessarily perform any better than placebo.
Mm,
And so then Western trained physicians will take that as these alternative medicine modalities as being inferior. And so, yeah, but again, it depends on the actual provider.
mm. Yeah, yeah, that's always interesting to see, like, the cross between the 2 and then what arguments people have for siding on on one decision versus the other. So that's pretty cool. I mean, you've already noted that like you believe in like a higher power. So would you say that you're a pretty spiritual person? Yeah.
Yeah, spiritual, not religious. I grew up Roman
Mhm.
Catholic, but um, yeah, I was definitely that Catholic who shows up, Easter, Christmas,
That Catholic?
sits in the back of the church, right? That
Yeah.
sort of thing. But yeah, definitely more spiritual.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic as well, so I understand.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Um, yeah, uh, yeah. I'll leave it at that.
So you're no longer practicing Catholicism is what I is what I take.
Yeah, basically, right.
Yeah, no, same. Yeah, religion could be like a whole different conversation, and again, it's a very sensitive topic. It's almost like politics for people. They
Mhm.
can get very like, I don't know, just very protective about their beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. But everyone is a unique individual, and so for me, I don't try to proselytize or push my beliefs on anyone, and you know um, that holds true for the way I practice medicine, and nothing political, but I always tell people it's your body, your decision, right? And so then my job as a provider is to do that, provide you the best information possible so that you can make the most informed decision on things that impact your health, right? And so,
Yeah. And has anybody ever maybe push back on doing like breath work or meditation because they see that as like a spiritual thing or a religious type of thing?
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. If I, recommend acupuncture, for instance, yeah, absolutely, I get pushback. Not always, but even if I do, that's okay. It's not for everyone, right? Again, everyone's unique, and so again, I just give them the options and let them run with
Mhm.
it.
And do you think for the survival intensive course that you're now teaching, would cold exposure ever be something that you potentially introduce into the curriculum?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But the problem with that for the survival intensive is that we don't meet often enough in order to really be able to add in cold exposure.
Mhm.
Because cold exposure, yeah, that's something that you need to do on a regular basis and pretty frequently, right? And so, yeah, it'd be nice, but I don't see us adding that in.
Yeah, because then I could see it being like, okay, yeah, we're gonna try some cold exposure because we're always out in the cold when you're doing these courses anyway.
Hmm.
So it's like you're doing that, but then you start introducing more breath work into the practice as well, and then they can see like, oh, okay, now I understand. Like this type of breathing really does help with calming everything down. But I definitely understand what you mean. Like you can do it like a one and done type of thing, but it doesn't mean it's really gonna stick for people. So. Yeah.
Right?
Maybe that could be a separate course that you guys do in the future.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
You jump in a river somewhere.
Sure. There's a creek on the campus, so sure, why not?
Right? Um, let's see. So we've been focusing on the survival intensive. We've talked about breath work and cold exposure. And a lot of that is really about pushing like your own limits, figuring out like where your body stands and even your mind and your emotions. What do you think is like the most challenging thing that you've seen for students to overcome? Would you say it's more of the physical, emotional, mental challenge or something something else?
It's all tied together, and the biggest challenge is always inertia.
Mm,
It's as human beings, we very quickly and easily fall into a routine, and we like to be comfortable. right? No one likes to be uncomfortable. And so that's always the biggest challenge every year, right? Is getting people to realize, okay, it's okay to be uncomfortable. That yes, it is uncomfortable, but yes, you will get through it. You will overcome it. And then, yeah, that's breaking through emotional walls, physical walls, spiritual walls. And so, yeah, it's all tied together, but really, it's just the inertia, right? And getting people to realize, hey, it's okay, and you can do it.
Hmm. I think that stops a lot of people from starting new things because they get scared of, can I even overcome this? Can I even start? It's just, yeah, just take one step forward or take a moment to breathe and realize like not everybody was able to just jump into things right away. Like they also had to overcome these mental, emotional, spiritual, physical barriers. And do you think that students who drop out of the survival course end up dropping out because of extenuating circumstances, or do you think that some of them actually drop out because of those limitations within themselves or
Hard
perceived,
to know.
I should say?
Yeah, hard to know. Um, Either way, there's no judgment. It's just especially with the school in general, it's very supportive, right? And is very non-judgmental. And everyone is going to be in a different place in their path, right? And so, um, yeah, if it's just not a good time, or it's just not going to work for where they are currently on their path, that's okay. We'll still be
Mhm,
there. So yeah, if you want to take up that challenge again, yeah, absolutely, come back.
mhm. And how often do you see, I was gonna say recurring students, but like, just like the frequent students coming back to take these courses?
Um, Not all too often. A lot of times, so once you've gone through the survival intensive, wanting to go back through the survival intensive is different. I don't. I mean, I don't want to say that it's anticlimactic, but it is a little
Mhm,
anticlimactic. If the school offered a higher level, a more advanced survival intensive, I think that would be great. And I think we would see a lot more students coming back for that. But yeah, so to answer your question, I don't see it too often, but yeah, we do have students coming back who have dropped out or have actually gone through the entire course and have come back through the survival
mhm.
intensive.
And I realize that we've been talking about the survival intensive, and most people are like, what does that even mean? Like they don't really know what the curriculum um like has, like what it's about. But I know that you just took over for this year. And so would you be able to provide like a little summary or overview of how you're going to be running the course this year?
Sure. So as you know, it's an 8 month course, and we meet for one weekend a month for 8 months. And there are several overnight weekends scattered throughout the 8 months. And then it culminates in that final 5 day trip out in somewhere that you don't know where the location is until right before the trip. Um, and but the focus really is more on primitive skills, right? So friction fires and debris shelters and that sort of thing. As far as the curriculum that I've developed for this year, I'd like it to be a little more inclusive and a little more rigorous. And for sure, I've added in more of the psychological aspects of it. So a lot more sit spots and breath work and mental cleansing and all of that.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Maybe one day I'll just pop in and be like, "Hey guys, like I'm just auditing the course."
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this year we have two students from last year's class. or 2 years
Oh,
ago.
really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Who are taking it or are
Hmm.
like TAs?
No, who are actually taking it.
Oh.
And then we have one TA. He took it in 2015, 2016, something like
Oh,
that.
wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I thought about doing the TA this year, but I was like, "Oh, I'm also doing tracking," and then I started all these other creative projects, and I was like, "I don't wanna
Yeah.
overwhelm myself with all of this stuff," but I think it would be really cool to just come back and actually, like you said, it's like you went through it as a student, but coming back and seeing how other people are experiencing it, I think that would be really cool and how you can provide insight into their development. Um but I guess that's like what being a teacher is all about is just, again, learning to
Right.
support and learning to listen and observe and not just handing over the cake when, they haven't
Hmm.
even like, I don't know, figured out the recipe yet. That doesn't make sense.
I got you.
You're
I
like,
got you.
yeah, yeah, you make total sense.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Well, I'm glad. Oh, yeah, but that's really cool. Like it would be really interesting to see like how you run the course and I'm starting to think about like survival 2.0 or like the advanced classes. So, from your perspective, what would that entail like compared to the intro?
So the advanced survival intensive would incorporate just primitive um, methods or skills, right? So nothing man-made. So it would go back to just stone tools, and so a little more intensive, right? Because you know it's nice when you have a knife. It's nice when you have a water bottle, but if you take those things away, well, you just upped, the ante as far as the intensity of your situation. And so, yeah, I think that's what that would look like. And I think it would be more overnight weekends, and I think it would be more of a deep dive into different subjects. So the survival intensive, yeah, you learn a ton of different skills, but we don't really deep dive into anything because there's just not enough
Yeah.
time for that, right? And so so flint knapping, right? So creating sharp edges from rocks. Um, you could have an entire year course of that and still not be great at it. And that's true for any of the skills that we teach and that you learn during the survival intensive. But yeah, so the advanced survival intensive, yeah, would allow us to take a deeper dive into each individual skill.
Yeah. And do that cold exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean, would you guys ever run I understand why we do the survival course in the winter because, yeah, you wanna make the fire, but have y'all ever thought of just running one in the summer? Because that's like a totally different adaptive experience, like, the other one, you're adapting to the cold, but with this one, it's like now you're adapting to the heat, so there's a lot of other different methods that you have to learn and take on, in order to really be okay in the heat because a lot of people deal with like heat exhaustion, I'm sure, but you know, what would that experience be like in the summer for students?
Again, that's a whole uncomfortable thing, and so yeah, I don't see too many people wanting to expose themselves to Central Texas heat.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would totally do it because that's just something else to deal with. Like our ancestors had to deal with the heat and had to obviously deal with the cold and it's like it's one of those situations where it's like maybe people are living in warmer, hotter climates and that is going to be more normal for them, but if you're a person that likes to travel and this and that, like you may end up in a very hot area, Arizona or New
Mhm.
Mexico or Mexico, whatever, like any of those situations, but then it's like there are mountains and things out there and if they end up stuck, then what do you do? when it comes to dealing with the heat, like what are the survival tactics to dealing with the heat? Like, do you dig in the sand to find the cool area? And like, I don't know. Like that would be like a totally different skill set, I think, to learn.
Yeah, it is. But even with doing the survival intensive during the winter months, yeah, those same principles that you learn for maintaining your core body temperature in the cold, yeah, you just reverse it in essence. And you can still apply those same concepts to the heat, right? Yeah, there are things, hard skills that yeah you can learn to deal with the heat in general, but again, concepts are still the same.
Mhm.
But really, sweating it out in 110-degree humid weather, oh no.
I mean, you're talking to somebody who's gone running at like 90, 100 degrees. So I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's just another level of
Sure,
temperature that you deal with. That's it.
sure, but you're a different breed, right? And so yeah, but most people just
Yeah.
right, they're not gonna want to dish out hard-earned money
Yeah.
to suffer in the heat like that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I hear you. And then for you, I think I remember you mentioning that one of your favorite things from the survival course was being able to make your own like Tinder bundle or starting your own fire the first time. Was that right?
yeah. So the survival 101, yeah, one of the first things that we do is friction fire, and the first time that I was able to make a coal and then blow it and nurture it into fire was life changing, and that's what really hooked me into wanting to learn those skills. But um, ultimately, it's what you learn is self reliance,
Mm,
yeah, and improves your self confidence. And for me, that stimulated a different part of the brain, a different part of the heart, to just continue to push past my comfort zones and to continue to improve and grow. And really, that's what everyone should be doing, right? And so, as I mentioned before, yeah, we so easily get stuck in our routines and our bubbles that we run around in, and so yeah, it's nice to push past that.
yeah. And so, of now having taught and have been a student, what do you think has been like the ultimate lesson that you've learned about yourself in that entire process?
Interesting. A lot, but the main thing is that every time I feel like I have a handle on a given skill or situation, that there's always so much more to learn. There are always way more questions. And, um, that so taking over as an instructor this year, I realized, yeah, I got pretty complacent in my skills,
Mm,
and that we had the first weekend class in October. I was like, okay, it was a little eye opening. Like, dude, yes, certain things, but you really need to put in the dirt time,
mm,
and yeah, complacency. Reared its ugly head. And so, that's the biggest thing really is that, really should always be growing and improving.
yeah.
That was the biggest thing I learned.
Oh, that's awesome. No, that's really good. I mean, some people may never figure out an answer to that question because they just haven't had the time to just self-reflect. And so it's great to see that as a teacher, you're also just constantly doing that and reflecting and, even admitting to yourself, like, yeah, with complacency, like that's something that many people go through in their in their lives. Complacency with their job or where they live or their diets. Again, like never really um I'm not saying this about you, but like again, like just folks, they don't necessarily push themselves beyond that. I mean, I've been stuck and I've been complacent with a lot of things, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but like,
yeah.
yeah, no, it's great to hear. I mean, and I know that you'll appreciate the dirt time. You always like playing outside from what I could
Oh,
tell.
always, always.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe that would be like a pretty cool activity is just get folks together every once in a while that are not in your class, and then we can just get together and practice the skills because I know there are some folks that they would still love to practice, but unless it's like for me, for example, unless it's on the calendar, it's not always going to be like at the forefront of my mind to be like, "Oh yeah, I got to remember to practice this," because there's so many
Mhm.
other things to keep track of.
Well, life is so chaotic, right?
Yeah.
And there are just so many things and that you need to do and want to do. And so, yeah, it would be fantastic to, every weekend, for instance, like, yeah, get together and play in the dirt. But, um, you know,
Yeah, life.
life's busy.
Yeah. Well, as we like go to wrap things up, is there anything that you would like to share with listeners or any type of guidance or advice or things that maybe have helped your growth along this journey?
Um, the main thing really is enjoy the heck out of life. There are just so many different things to experience, to learn, and so really, take time to do that for yourself, because self care is amazingly important. And you have those people who um, will just give, and give, at the expense of their own well being, whether that's physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever. And so, yeah, really, you just got to take care of yourself first, be good to yourself, and again, enjoy the heck out of life.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's one of my like life quotes is like live life to the fullest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think more people need
Absolutely.
to do that. And I hope that, through conversations like this, it opens people up to be like, oh, there is more that I can do with my life. And again, like you can make these changes at any age. You can do, well, you can do most things, I think, at different ages. But again, there will be some restrictions.
Sure, but yeah, no, absolutely. Really, yeah, there are no
Yeah.
limitations, except for the self-imposed ones. And so, again, try to push past those and really, but again, just enjoy the heck out of life.
Yeah. Doctor's orders, people.
Absolutely. I'll write that in a prescription for you.
I would love it. And if any of you would love to talk to Manny, in the description, I'm going to be including his email and I believe phone number, right? Or,
Sure.
I mean, we don't have to include the phone number. Email could be good too, but
Sure.
he'll respond when he's available, folks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again, Manny, so much for your patience today. Yeah, I'm sorry, my like cough attack just like interfered with a lot of things, and it's just I appreciate that we've been able to just continue the conversation, and again for your patience and for also just sharing part of your story. I know that we can dive in so much more and see how like your uncle influenced your pathway to medicine.
Yeah, that's an interesting story for sure.
Interesting stories from what I keep hearing.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Fair enough.
But I mean, jokes aside, like it's always great to hear how people are guided into their pathways and into their careers, and especially with medicine. And I'm very fortunate to have been able to spend time with you for the intensive course, and then again, even for the first aid course as well too. So I appreciate learning from you, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your experience with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's always so great visiting with you.
Yeah, likewise. And I know we'll hang out soon, and we'll like work on building fires and I
Sure.
don't know, jumping into the cold water. I know some folks that would join us actually.
Okay.
So
That sounds
yeah,
great.
so it'd be fun.
We'll play in the
Yeah.
dirt.
Yeah. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much again for your time. And until the next one, I'll talk to y'all soon.